is a very interesting concept in art, and it's something that we see all the time, although we might not realize it. So the first question is, what is symmetry? Does anybody have a guess? Alright, so here are some of your guesses. We have symmetry being the same, or even, like each other. Faces can be symmetrical. Art, there's symmetry in art. Painting, sculpture, furniture, styles, realism, visually pleasing, that's something symmetrical does. Our body and hands, ears, feet, shoes, insects, coins, buildings can be symmetrical, pictures, blankets, clocks, pillows, beds, crosses, cups, plates, and cars. So the next question I have is, how can we put some of these into different groups so that they're similar to each other? Does any of you have maybe an idea for the first group after looking at the list? The first group can be the body. We've all noticed that our eyes are symmetrical. One looks like the other. Our ears are symmetrical, well, at least mostly. Our nose is usually the same on one side as it is the other. Our arms are usually the same size. Our legs and our feet, they're the same on both sides. That's one way to describe them. They're even. Hopefully they're the same length. Most people's are. Our faces usually look the same on one side as they do the other. Our hands, although if we're right-handed, sometimes we're a little bit bigger, but otherwise they're the same. And again, our ears and our feet. So that's one group. Does anybody have ideas for another group? That's right. Another group can be just specific art things. Art concepts like things that look the same on both sides, like a painting. Sculptures sometimes need to be symmetrical. They need to have good balance on one side or the other. Different styles will be symmetrical. We have non-symmetrical styles like abstract, so those wouldn't be. So actual styles can be either symmetrical or not. Realism. When we're looking at a realistic painting, we want the face of that painting to look the same on both sides, so we need a symmetrical painting. Visually pleasing, again, another concept in art. Things that are really neat to look at. We want things that, when we look at them, to feel balanced, to feel symmetrical, because it's something we are familiar with. What about one more group that we can come up with the ideas that you guys came up with? That's a great group. Group 3, pretty much everything else that we can think of. We have things, again, that are the same, or they're even, they look like each other. Things like furniture. You know, one side of the table usually looks like the other side of the table. Again, visually pleasing. If we have a nice piece of art on the wall, and it's part of our decor and our furniture in our room, we want it to be placed on a wall somewhere symmetrical to other items so that it's visually pleasing. Shoes. We want our shoes to be the same on both sides, just opposite from each other because we have left feet and right feet. Insects. Insects can be the same on one side as the other. We don't see spiders with 3 arms on one side and 4 on the other. They're symmetrical. Coins. Although there may be pictures on each side that are different, it isn't really a coin unless it's round and it's symmetrical. It's the same on one side as the other. Buildings. When we look at skyscrapers, usually they're symmetrical. Each of the sides look the same. Pictures of people, because of that aspect of being symmetrical on our faces and our bodies, pictures will be symmetrical, but we also want to have a picture of either somebody in the middle, or we have maybe 2 people, they're side by side, so there's an evenness to it. Clocks, just by their nature, are symmetrical, although they have different numbers going around. It's the same on one side as it is the other. Pillows, we don't see too many like triangular pillows where, you know, there's a little bit off on one side or another. pretty much the same size on both sides. Beds are symmetrical. Crosses, cups, plates. Our bowls. Now, if our bowls aren't symmetrical and they're different shape on one side or the other, we're liable to spill our soup or our cereal. So this is a great group. And these are just general things that we see in the world that are symmetrical. So we have our three groups. Remember, we have our art concepts, we have our body parts, and we have other things that we see around like furniture and things like that. So in order to understand a little bit more about things that are symmetrical, let's break those down even further. Does anybody have an idea how we can break down that first group of body parts? That's right. It doesn't just have to be our bodies. It can be any living thing. Sharks look the same on one side as they are the other, and birds and fish and dogs and cats and cows, just about every living thing. We already said the insects and the butterfly. Now, butterfly, it has wings on both sides of its body that look the same. Antennas that look the same. They're symmetrical. Ladybugs, the spots are usually the same on one side and the other, not always, but we know they have wings on each side. And that symmetry helps them fly. Because if they have one really big wing and one really small wing, their bodies are different on each side, that insect wouldn't be able to fly. And the same thing with the birds. So this is taking that first group and making it a little bit broader, having a few more things in there so we can apply it to not just our bodies, but to other living things in the world. I can't think of too many things other than maybe some sort of strange jellyfish type thing in the ocean that doesn't have symmetry, just like our bodies. How about second group? How can we break that one down? Very good. We have art concepts, but we also have different mediums. So if we're going to do a painting and we want it to be symmetrical, we also might want to have a sculpture that's symmetrical. We might actually want to have a collage that's symmetrical. We use different materials in art. So fabrics and other types of paints and mosaics and, like I said, collages that can be done with pictures, or collages can be done with materials like colored clay or tiles. Those types of things want to be visually pleasing. That's a very big concept in art. And so that symmetry is important. It doesn't just mean that it's exactly the same size on one side as the other. We want to have things placed in pictures, placed on sculptures, placed in different mediums that have that balance and that symmetry. And clay pots. If we make a pot or we make a bowl type of thing, it has to be symmetrical for it to be functional. Although there are some beautiful art that have non-symmetrical elements to them, but they still have to have that balance. And with something that you're going to use, something functional, like a bowl, like I said before, you end up spilling your cereal if it doesn't have the size the same or doesn't have the right shape and parts of it fall out. So there has to be a functional part of art also. So that last group, the group with just about everything else in it, how can we further break down those specific ideas? Very good. That's some great ideas. So we have things that just are functional. We're going to have lots of things in our environment that are symmetrical, but really we want to focus on what is actually going to be functional. If our kitchen table had two different legs on one side and then it did the other and they were different lengths, our food would all slide off. We'd be sitting like this sideways on eating our dinner. So we have to have functional symmetry on our table. Same thing with our counters and our kitchen and our sinks and our cups and our bowls and our plates, things like that that we use need to have symmetry. They need to be the same on both sides so that they can function in the way they're supposed to. Coins, same thing. Although there are lots of different shapes of coins around the world, the most functional when we want to use them in vending machines to get something to eat, or we want to use them to pay our parking meter. They all need to be symmetrically round and right in the thickness, because otherwise they don't work. Otherwise the machine won't take them. So there's a lot of concepts here. Blankets. Now, our blanket can probably be non-symmetrical. It would probably still keep us warm. But we see it in our environment symmetrical. We either have it as a rectangle or a square or sometimes round. They all have the same on one side as they do the other. blanket has a top and a bottom. Every blanket does. So that is a symmetrical concept applied to an everyday thing. Now, I don't know what a non-symmetrical blanket would look like, but I'm thinking that a really big top on one blanket and a really small bottom, you're going to end up with a very warm shoulders and very cold toes. So they should be symmetrical. So that's a very functional way of having a blanket, because it's symmetrical. So here are some examples of symmetry. We have, like I said, furniture, couches. There's lots of different designs can be done with couches, but we need it to be functional. You need to have symmetry when it comes to one end of it to the other. Even though it can be different shapes, it has to have that balance and it has to have that functional symmetry. Furniture, same thing besides couches. Our closets and our drawers and our cabinets and our things like that need to have symmetry, need to have balance in order to be functional. And then, of course, butterflies and insects and people, we all have that symmetry. Even in our art, even this picture over here of a sunshine flower, it has symmetry. The eyes are the same on both sides. We have a little bit of expression with the eyebrow, but it has balance. And we have a nice, visually pleasing thing to look at because it's symmetrical. Now, if half of that picture was melting off the page or it was distorted in some way and it was not symmetrical, it would be a different idea. We wouldn't have that same pleasant look at it. It would have a different abstract idea to it. And that's abstract is another concept we can go over the next time. That is, symmetrical and non-symmetrical are two opposites. So when you're learning about symmetrical, you think of all the things that are symmetrical, and then you think of the things that aren't symmetrical, and you start putting those in a different category. And then later we'll go on to what non-symmetrical things are, and what good comes out of that as well, and what function we can have of that as well, and what we see of it in art. All right, any other questions? Well, your project is going to be, we're going to draw a symmetrical picture. And what you're going to start off with is only half of that picture. And you have to complete the other half. And using the concepts that I've explained, you're going to have to apply the symmetry idea to the other side of the picture so that you can tell what it is you need to draw. This is the picture that you're going to draw. Now, it seems like a very simple picture. You just have a clown there with a hat and a bow tie. So what you're going to get is only half of that clown. So what you have to apply is the concept of symmetry. It's really simple with this picture, although it doesn't seem like it. You have an overall circle that you have to complete for its head. And if you notice, that's all that is a circle. So you use the concept of symmetry, and you continue that circle. The second part is the nose, and it's just a smaller circle. So when you're thinking about how to draw this, in your mind, you're going to think, okay, this is just a circle, so all I have to do is draw the rest of that circle. Now, it gets a little more complicated as you get to the bow tie. You have a small circle here, then you have to complete a whole section that is just like the other side. So again, you're going to use that concept of symmetry and apply what you see here exactly on the other side, because it's the same. Then, with the eyes, you're doing that same process. Even though the eyes aren't circles, they are the same on both sides. So all you have to do is look at one side and apply that to the other side. Where this gets a little more complicated, after you complete the eyes and the mouth, is trying to decide where to put that hat. And this is where you have to use other ideas in your head other than symmetry, because you're going to have to figure out, okay, I've got a little bit of the hat, what is it going to look like, the rest of it going to look like, and how is that going to start with the hair on the other side, which is exactly the same. So it does get a little bit more complicated. You start with the head, go to the nose, the bow tie, and then the face, and then as you get further out into the project, it's going to get a little more complicated. But you're using that concept of balance along with symmetry so that that hat looks good on that clown, and it looks visually pleasing. You see that balance, and it looks good on there. Even though it's not exactly the same on both sides, you can see that it looks good, visually pleasing. Thanks, class, and have a wonderful day.